of time and space. Everywhere and anywhere, every star that ever was. Where do you want to start?
Hello and welcome to All of Time and Space. I'm Mark.
And I'm Ian.
And we made it, Ian. We finally made it to the end of Season 3.
I mean,
I never thought it would end.
I can't believe we've made it. I remember those dim and distant childhood days when the sun seemed to blaze for months at a time and there was no pressure. Life was free and easy, and we began Series 3. And yeah, we've just kind of grown up in the shade of it. I mean, the Great Depression didn't go on as long as Season 3. Do you know what I mean?
Well, you know, for all that, I really enjoyed it. But yes, it was quite the test of stamina, I think.
It really was. I mean, it's astonishing when you look back at the sort of 10 stories and you think, well, one of them was, 12 weeks long. So really that's 3 stories.
Yeah.
So, it's just ridiculously enormous.
It really is, yeah. I feel a bit bad as well because when we had Dave and Rob on from the Doctor Who show, Dave was talking about how he realises that maybe not everyone enjoys the Hartnell years as much as he does. And I felt a bit bad because I feel like we've generally enjoyed it. We are going to pick, a little bit. I suppose that's kind of what we do, but...
Yeah, I mean, his point that it's an outlier in terms of Doctor Who history and that from sort of Troughton onwards it's very much more of a formulaic show means that the Hartnell era is this really exciting, different and occasionally kind of arresting process of stories. And... I wouldn't have watched most of these if we hadn't been doing this, I don't think, and I would have regretted that on my deathbed.
Well, let's see how much we really love them, shall we? Shall we head off to the Obverse book for a pint and a chat about?
We can do, although if you were thinking of trying a different Doctor Who pub, because I know the Obverse book is often very full, we could try the Dog and Dalek in Leicester. Or the Pteroleptil Tap Room in Canterbury. So set the coordinates and we'll see which of those we can find a seat in.
All right, well, I mean, the randomiser's on, so we could end up anywhere.
Oh, no, we'll probably end up in Mike Yates's wine lodge again then.
As long as it's not a Wetherspoon. So anyway, right, let's set the coordinates. Well, here goes nothing. Let's find out where we've arrived.
Oh, this looks very familiar.
Oh, it's the Obverse book again after all that.
Yes. You'd have thought they'd have changed the horse brasses by now. There's a table over there. I'll make a break for it. Right. You can bring me several beers.
Oh, right.
Okay.
I might need a tray. Is it... your usual?
Yeah, I'll have a couple of those. And some whiskey chasers.
Nice, okay. Money no object.
Absolutely not.
I suppose it is the 1970s, so it probably goes a lot further.
Yes, that's true, actually. I could buy a house with this lot.
Anyway, let's get on to the matter in hand.
Let's. I can hardly wait. I'm so excited because I really hope I've guessed what order I think they're going to fall in, and I'm...
Well, this is the fun for me in doing these, because I get to see whether you've worked it out or not. Now, I'm reliably informed there are 10 stories in season 3.
It can, the argument can be made if we split out Mission to the Unknown as a separate story, then I've got 10.
Yes. Right, we're on the same hymn sheet there, so that's
Excellent. Good.
Now,
Yes.
in any competition, so to speak, there's always going to be a loser.
There is always going to be very much a loser.
The runt of the litter.
The bottom of the pile.
Yes. And if anyone's listened to our season 3 episodes, it's not going to come as a massive surprise. Would you like to hazard a guess as to which story came in 10th place?
Well, now let me go out on a limb, stand on the rim of the volcano, do my dance, look at the bones, look at the rain, look at the clouds, look at the tea leaves. Could it possibly be the Celestial Toymaker?
Ah, you got it first time.
Yes!
Unbelievable. How did you guess? So, when we covered this one, we had Jeff from the Runcible Report. Mm-hmm. He gave it a 5. And we had Sucky from Around a Console. He gave it 4. They were rather more generous than we were. Ian, you gave this a 2.
Right.
This is out of 10 for anyone who's not familiar with our
scoring system.
Oh, yes.
Wow.
And I gave it 1.
So
it ended up with a grand total of 3 on the average.
So when you said I gave it 2, I was kind of mortified. I was thinking it was bad, but that's a really low score. But then if you gave it even less, then I'm entirely happy, and I stand by my decision because Mark, it was rubbish.
It was painful, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, it was. You can't put your finger on it doing anything sort of explicitly wrong. It's a children's show. This was very much 4 episodes of very child-skewed family drama, with the kind of tropes and characters they'd know from childhood games and playground games and things like that. It was just so cheaply, leadenly and ploddingly realised. And
I think that was the thing that really annoyed me about it, was that you had what could have been a really amazing story with all those great ideas that were going into it.
Yeah.
But it was realised so boringly. It's just...
It was...
You had this being who was almost like a god, and he's reduced to doing sort of parlour games. It's just awful.
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, the expression I want to use is half-arsed. That might have been an expression I used at the time. I can't remember.
Yes,
but this being who can warp matter with his, with so much as a thought, who can render the Doctor invisible. He's got unlimited powers and unlimited roast pudding, but all he can do for his day job is, make giant hopscotch games and I can't even remember the games. They were so poor. There was a bit with some chairs, one of which was electrified or something.
Blind Man's Buff.
Absolutely. I mean, it's almost as if at the time of filming, the Toymaker, portrayed by Michael Gough, was kind of, I don't know, preoccupied by going home to an incredibly tall, glamorous blonde.
Yes. Yeah, no, it was really hard going. It was quite the test.
Yes, it was a point at which one can see that some people may have tuned out of Doctor Who. And season 3 is an interesting one because it kind of loses, on average, kind of half its viewers as the year goes on. And I would like to lay the blame for that at the Celestial Toymaker.
Who knows, if it ever gets recovered, we might have to eat our words, and it might end up being the all-time classic that some people think it is.
Well, we could indeed have to eat humble pie, but it would be humble pie with a secret key baked into it.
Have we got anything positive to say about this? I suppose Michael Gough was really good, wasn't he?
Michael Gough was brilliant. Jackie Lane's enthusiasm and gusto was very much needed, because I think that was the main thing that pulled the viewer through the 4 episodes. Stephen Taylor was just sort of I'd say quite chippy and snarky about the whole thing, and Hartnell was
quite directional.
He was very directional. Directional. Hartnell wasn't even in it. It was just a medley of unwatchable things. So I am very pleased. I am honoured and delighted to award the Celestial Toymaker last place in our season retrospective.
Yes, I'm very sorry, Celestial Toymaker. You have earned the wooden spoon this time round. So, next up, in 9th place, so you're going to hazard a guess?
Yes, in 9th place, I'll show my working here. What I've done is I've looked at the 10 stories of the season, and I've sort of remembered how much I enjoyed them.
Right.
And then I've sort of ranked them according to that, with no real thought or recall for anyone else's opinion. It is all
not our
about
wonderful
me.
Guests.
Not them. No.
Your long-suffering co-host.
No, none of that. It's all about me. And the story I've got in 9th place, and this is where we may begin to deviate, I've got The Savages.
Oh, he's good. It's 2 for 2.
Oh.
You scored it 5. Our guest, Matt Barber, gave it 4. And I gave it 5, so it came out with 4.6 as its average.
I mean, that seems... 5 seems generous if Matt's giving it 2. But, I mean, I did think at the time it was largely terrible.
Oh, Matt gave it a 4.
Oh, sorry, Matt gave it a 4, didn't he? Yeah. It was... And going back to the point I made about this was a very long series and one of the stories was in itself as long as 3 stories, you think this season could have cut a little bit of dead wood. And already we've identified 8 very dead wood episodes that could very easily have not been filmed.
Yeah. I thought you were coming out with a rather rude way of saying it was the episode where Stephen finally leaves. I thought that was cutting out the deadwood. Very rude. That
would have been very, very rude, and I don't want to be rude to Peter Purvis. Rude, Purvis. I don't,
I think this one suffers just because we can't see it, and I think there's the makings of a good story. So I thought that Frederick Yeager, his performance was really fun, and I think that could have really stepped up another level if we were able to see the business that he was bringing to the screen. I mean, I know you're a big fan of the some of the names of the characters.
I mean,
I'm
still chanting exhaust. I'm staggered every time I recall that someone invented a name that preposterous. Not since oh God, I can't remember who it was, but one of the first, I think it was the 8th Doctor novel, had an alien called Packip, and I just thought, oh Christ, this is weak. Did
you know that Ian Stewart Black had a particularly expensive MOT in the lead up to writing this story? And he had to pay for a whole new exhaust system on his vehicle, and I think that was obviously playing on his mind at the time.
That would explain really quite a lot, including that cut sequence where the Doctor inexplicably walks into a car repair shop and starts beating people with his cane.
Yeah, apparently the character name went through several iterations before he settled on exhaust. Yeah.
Oh.
Catalytic converter was an early one, but that soon changed.
Yes. Well, it was. I don't know. It probably wasn't as bad in isolation as it is considered amongst the rest of the stories in season 3. It had nothing to recommend it. It was treading water, and it was one of a number of stories that were very much treading water, and it was.
Yeah.
I don't want to come over all Nathan Bottomley again, but it was just tiresome.
Yes, I mean, there's no getting away from it. It's not the most exciting of stories, not in the way that we're able to enjoy it at the moment. And I use the word enjoy somewhat.
I mean, I think you were using air quotes there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bunny ears.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, sorry, Savages fans.
Are there any
That's,
Savages fans?
I'm sure there must be. Actually, one positive I would say is Dodo's really good in this story. I think she's got a lot of agency. She goes around smashing stuff up, and
Well, good for
yeah,
her.
it's one of her better stories.
Good for her.
So that's my positive to take out of it.
Okay, that's a good one.
Okay, 8th place.
Now then, in 8th place,
It's going to get a bit more tricky now.
So I don't hope, that's the wrong word. I believe it might be The Massacre.
Oh, unfortunately, you're wrong. Though.
Oh, well, we have a schism. Right
do.
then. So I can't imagine then. What is it? What story came 8th?
So in 8th place, we have The Myth Makers.
Oh, no way!
Yep.
So I went very high
That's-
pitched there, didn't I?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think this is going to annoy a lot of people that seem to listen to our show. They all really rate it, but I don't think we were quite so enamoured. So I gave it 5. Our guest Phil Cannon from the Who's He podcast gave it 5. And you were somewhat more generous. You gave it 7. So that came out with an average of 5.6.
Oh, wow. That's really surprised me. I think, to be fair, I'm fond of the story because I'm fond of the myth.
Yeah.
And my disappointment stems from my affection for the myth of the Trojan War and what have you. It possibly wasn't the best realised story. Certainly in terms of the recons I watched, there were very few.
It's so hard because there's
photographs.
hardly anything to work from, is there? I mean, it's amazing what they did with it, to be fair.
I mean, but didn't the model of the horse look fantastic?
Oh, yeah.
You went Australian there.
Oh, yeah, mate.
Yeah. God damn. So I am really upset that Mythmakers didn't come slightly higher.
We should have given it a higher score then.
Well, yeah, I did. It was you and it was Phil.
Yeah. It's all our fault.
I thought it was going to come in at about 6th, which would have been, I think, a fairly respectable showing. But I guess without any actual footage to watch back, then, yeah.
Yeah. For me, it falls a bit short of the standard that was set by something like the Romans. I really love the Romans. I could watch that any day. But the humour didn't work for me in this one. Maybe because I'm not so familiar with the source material. But it kind of didn't quite hit home for me. Which probably is one of the reasons why it's lying in 8th place. There is a sort of a split that occurs after the next story, and then it's really far more positive from that part in. So don't give up, dear listeners. Because we have been moaning quite a lot for the first.
We will start
3
saying
stories,
nice
but
things any story now.
We will.
Yeah.
So unless you've got something else that you want to say about the Mythmakers apart from blaming me and Phil, shall we have your best guess at what came in 7th place?
So in 7th, I'm going to kind of circle back to the massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve.
Yeah, you are you're wrong again, I'm afraid.
Oh my
Ian.
God.
I know.
So in that case, I can't guess again. Then the whole podcast just becomes me guessing stories, and the people at home will probably have more
Flailing
idea.
around to
like a
find an
drunk
answer.
man in the Coach and Horses,
Yeah.
circa 1977.
In 7th place was Galaxy 4.
It was Galaxy 4. Okay, yeah. No, that doesn't surprise me too much. That was
Yeah.
that was in 7th on my list.
So, yes, Andrea, our guest from the Track This Out podcast, she scored it 5.5. I was far more smitten with this one. I gave it 7.5.
That's fair.
And you gave it a 5, so it ended up with a average of 6.
So why were the two of you giving it sort of an extra half mark when I was just doing
Well,
whole numbers?
it was good enough to merit being better than a 7, but not quite good enough to be an 8. So I gave it 7.5.
That's very scientific. I can't argue with that.
Yeah. I really like this one. Since we recorded our episode on it, they've released the animated version. I don't know if you've had a chance to see that yet.
No, not at all. I think I've seen some people commenting on it on Twitter, and I understand the animation was workmanlike.
I thought it was okay.
Yeah,
Maybe my expectations are relatively low, but I really enjoyed it.
good. Did it improve the story?
You're getting a much more accessible version of the story, so it's something you can just stick on. You get to know the characters. I think it's a nice little play on not judging a book by its cover, and obviously one thing it does get over is the budget in terms of the set. So when you have the cliffhanger where the Doctor's desperately trying to get into the real ship, that looks a bit more convincing than the hastily constructed gate made out of what looks like to be drinking straws.
Yes, I don't know how anyone could ever hope to penetrate such a fearsome defence as that.
Yeah.
I can't.
There's a lot to love in this one.
I can't remember there being a lot to love about it. I can.
Okay, the Chumbleys.
Yeah, that's right. The Chumblies were in it. They made
So cute.
They made an annoying noise.
Yeah, Marga.
Marga and her hat.
That great soliloquy she does, that's really good.
Yep. And
That's a proper season 3 standout moment.
and was this the one where Stephen Taylor gets locked in a airlock,
He does.
even though
He
he's
does.
a trained
Wearing one of
astronaut?
Barbara's
cardigans?
yes.
The Fool. And it was the last kind of full Vicky story, because actually what we didn't mention when we talked about the Myth Makers was that was her final story, and that might be why I marked it, as low as 7. Was that?
Well, that's why I blanked it out. I don't like the idea of her leaving because she was so good.
I wholly support and agree with you. So I can remember her having quite a lot of agency in this story, and there were some sort of giant monsters that looked, I think, rather unattractive and unappetising.
The Rills.
Yeah.
Well,
which is
I think you're being very judgmental.
very speciesist. Yeah, no, you're right. I am, and that's kind of the point of the story, wasn't it? That
Yes.
the attractive leggy blondes were all evil, and the sort of huge bloated walrus-like monsters. I'm sort of, for some reason, I've got a mental image of Boris and Carrie.
Yeah, it's not pleasant, is it?
Let's
Not for much longer, hopefully.
No, not indeed for much longer. And by the time this is broadcast, people might not even remember that he was I forget his name, who used to be the Prime Minister. Johnson, someone. Anyway.
That's showbiz.
Yes, it's a cruel business.
Okay, we're up to 6th place now.
So, and without wanting to sound like a broken record, I'm going to suggest possibly the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve.
Well, you're wrong. It's the War Machines. So, we had Dave and Rob from the Doctor Who show on as our guests. Dave gave this one an 8. You gave it 7. Rob gave it 7. And I gave it an 8. So it ended up with 7.5 as the average.
Well, this is pretty encouraging then, because if we're up to 7.5 as an average and we're sort of at the halfway point of the season, then the remaining stories must have been really
quite a lot of these stories.
Yeah, which is good, which is kind of what I thought had happened. It's quite reassuring as we go through this to discover that my memories are in some ways fairly reliable and accurate. I am surprised the War Machines fell outside the top half of the season, but looking at what therefore would have made it into the top half of the season, I'm not surprised. The War Machines was very good, but it wasn't, I don't know, because I was about to say it wasn't very special or very, significant, but it was a kind of blueprint for where the show would go. And it was, as we remarked, it was kind of reminiscent, obviously, of the unit stories and a couple of Troughton stories, and even in some ways remembrance of the Daleks. So it was very much a more recognisable type of story. And yeah, maybe I would have expected it to figure slightly higher for that reason.
Yeah. No, I really like this one. You get to see Hartnell in what was then present-day London, hanging around all the groovy night spots and showing off his peacock dress sense.
Throwing some shapes and looking out for cracking birds or whatever they were called.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I think actually it was cracking typists, but we all know what they meant.
Yes. Which brings us on to Ben and Polly, the new companions.
Who were magnificent. And
They were.
I feel like we waited a very, very long time to get some kind of affable, human, relatable, kind of friendly faces in the TARDIS. Everyone was very sort of tense before Ben and Polly. It's hard to imagine Stephen relaxing and chilling out and having a laugh.
Relaxing?
Exactly. Laugh! Quiver with indignant rage.
I mean, my only real negative is, I think the guys said this as we were reviewing it, the early stuff is really good with Votan doing the mind control, and that's quite eerie and atmospheric. But then once the war machines kind of trundle onto the screen, it's perhaps slightly lacking in that respect.
You're right. It's very much a game of two halves, isn't it? It's the story of mind control that was inspired by the idea of a computer communicating through the telephone wires, which that was foresight for you. And then it does become this kind of cringy runaround with these oversized washing machines with pathetic rubber arms with building bricks on the end of them. I mean, it started off so well. Had it continued along the original lines of being about, evil computers taking people over with mind control, I think it would have been a very kind of Avengers kind of story. And I say this as someone who's literally watched 10 minutes of one episode of The Avengers.
I've seen a bit more than that.
Yeah. You're
definitely.
Of the two of us, you're the expert, really.
Well, I mean,
of the two of
I
us.
don't want to say that, but yeah.
About most things.
The bar is set very low in that respect.
That's true.
I thought it was really well directed. I think Michael Ferguson was the director on this one, and he does a great job with the particularly the stuff they filmed on location.
Which,
and Hartnell gets his sort of hero pose moment, doesn't he?
Absolutely. I think I'm gonna say that much like the trajectory of the story, the direction kind of in the first couple of episodes was really, I don't want to use the word vibrant, but I will. It was really engaging and fresh and different and energetic. And then as the story kind of collapsed into this tedious, predictable plot with a silly robot, the directing, I guess because of what he was having to point the camera at, it just suddenly slowed down and became much more pedestrian. But
poor old Dodo.
That remains astonishing. That and let's be honest, probably everyone listening to this podcast will have seen these stories years ago, and this won't come as any kind of news to them. And they'll probably be tearing their hair out that I'm still wanging on about it. But I feel that was an absolutely extraordinary piece of, I suppose, management by the BBC.
Or lack of.
Yeah. I mean, how do you, as it's a kids' programme. There is a responsibility to the children watching the show that they should feel kind of safe watching the show. And if their friends just disappear halfway through a story, that feels like an error.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll cope.
Okay, we're at the halfway stage. In 5th place.
Well, and I say this purely because I refuse to believe it came any higher. But in 5th place, are we looking at The Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve.
I think you might want to potentially change your guess for the next one, because no, it's the Gunfighters.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we had Ross Aitken from Gallifrey's Most Wanted on as our guest for that one, and he scored it a 6. You gave it a 9, and I gave it a 9, so that ended up as 8 as the average.
Wow. Yeah.
So we loved it.
Yeah.
Ross didn't mind it, but wasn't quite as bowled over as we were.
Well, presumably Ross has maybe watched it rather more often than perhaps both of us have, so...
And he probably has more of a right to be offended by the attempts at American accents.
Yeah, they were pretty bad.
Well, I mean, I didn't really pick out any that were particularly bad. Maybe I'm a bit tone deaf when it comes to that.
But it's fair enough, though. I mean, if I'm thinking about representation of English people in something like The X-Files, I bump on bad performances, and I will mark a story down quite heavily based on, the Dick Van Dyke accent on offer. So you can understand the opposite of that, and how perhaps offensive this story is to our American cousins.
I thought this had everything, really. It had the humour. It's quite an exciting story. The direction was really good. Direction! I thought Dodo was really good in this story. Stephen's not too bad either. The guest casts were brilliant, I thought.
And I'm not going to disagree with a single word you said. I think it was amazing. And you know what? I loved the song as well. I wouldn't want to see it done often, but I think as a one-off different approach to moving the story along, I thought it was inspired.
And as has been said ad infinitum, if you were watching in the 60s, you'd be watching it once a week, so it wouldn't perhaps drill its way into your ear quite as much as it does for us if we just binge it all in one go.
Well, I do binge them all in one go, and I remember the song fondly and vaguely, whereas I'm still walking into a room frowning for no reason and then muttering, "Exhaust!" Several months later. So, I think the song was brilliant. I think it was a great thing to do on a kids' show that it's finally in a setting that has a recognisable representational aesthetic, and you can do that kind of thing. You can do that kind of plinky plonky piano.
I think when you consider it's all done in studio, I think it looks really good.
Amazing. I mean, the bar, just to praise the carpenter on the set, but that was a great job. That looked entirely convincing. There was space outdoors for the fight sequences. There were a couple of different hotel rooms. It looked entirely sumptuous for the time and the budget involved.
Yeah, it was a firm favourite.
Yeah.
Okay, well, moving on then to number 4.
I mean, it could be bleeding anything, couldn't it, at this point? Yeah.
I'll give you a clue.
Okay.
So the story that came in 4th place made it into 4th by 0.1 of a point above the Gunfighters.
Good grief.
And is sitting just 0.2 below the story that came in 3rd place. So the 4th place story is on 8.1 and the 3rd place story is on 8.3.
So I'm looking at the vegetables I can see in the kitchen. Is the next story the Brassica of St. Bartholomew's Eve?
It's the Ark.
No way! I've gone very shrill again. I do apologise to anyone who I've just deafened. Or...
Any sensitive dogs that are listening.
Yeah, well, I've probably woken people up. People probably nodded off halfway through what we were saying about Galaxy 4, and suddenly they're now sitting bolt upright in bed.
Yes, so for the Ark, we had 2 guests. We had Lindsay from Trek This Out. She gave it 7.5. And we had Minnie Mackenzie, and she gave it 7. You gave it a 10.
Right.
It's a big favourite for you.
Yeah.
And I gave it an 8. So it came out with 8.1 as the average.
Yeah.
I like this one. It's good.
Yeah. I mean, everyone obviously enjoyed it, but you know, within certain gradations of enjoyment. I thought it was stunning because of a couple of factors. I mean, I think it looked really good.
Yeah, direction was superb.
Direction was superb. The sets were amazing.
The jungle was very
The jungle was
believable.
good. They got an elephant.
Yeah.
There was a giant statue. Then there was the little kind of space rocket thing that took them down to the planet, and
Yeah.
even that, which you know was kind of an afterthought. Once you've bothered doing an elephant in the studio and you've bothered having that huge statue, you think, well, we'll just use any old thing as a rocket. But there was even invention in that, in the way the doors moved and so on. You know, in every episode there was something really arresting. The story
and it's
was
also unique.
Yeah.
Just in terms of the plot mechanic and actually using time travel as part of the plot as opposed to a means to an end to just dropping the characters into the story.
Yeah, and just having that kind of midpoint where you thought the story was done and then it goes off on a different tangent. Again, really new, really exciting and really good. And
That's the clever thing, because at this stage it's a running serial, so although they have sort of separate titles for us as fans, when you're watching back in the day, you're just seeing the title card for whatever episode happens to be playing that week. So as far as you know, that's it. They've finished the story and they're off on their next adventure.
Yeah. It's
So coming back in week 3 and then finding they're back again, it must be quite the shock.
Absolutely. I think this was in terms of that kind of storytelling, I want to say bravery, but you know, just that willingness to try something new and complex for a kids show and different. I really thought this story would, you know, break the top 3.
I thought Hartnell was superb in this one.
I don't remember him being particularly bad in this one. That may or may not be pretty much the same thing.
No, I think he's really good. I think he owned it. I can't remember any fluffs.
That's right. There was, I think it was this story where we commented at the time that we couldn't really pick out any sort of mistakes or you know, or errors. Maybe he'd just come back from a holiday and he was feeling slightly more chipper. But yeah, there were his performances throughout season 3 did kind of wobble a little. Sometimes he was in full command of his material, and at other times I would say he had a more sort of thumbnail sketch idea of what was going on. But no, I thought the arc was really, and for me, as again, I think it was Dodo's finest hour. You know, this and the gunfighters. So two very strong stories for her. And the only thing, there is that sort of faintly creepy moment where Stephen sort of clutches her and holds her for an uncomfortably long amount of time while she's trying not to sneeze, and he's just having a bit of a, you know, grope. But no.
The other thing with this one, which sounds weird to say it, but it's quite a sci-fi story. There's a lot of Doctor Who is more of a sort of fantasy.
You know,
This is
that's
much
a really
more of a
good
sci-fi
point,
story.
because when you look at the stories in this season, you've got a very clear split in, you know, the Dalek's master plan. You're going all around the universe, planets, rockets, spaceships, whatever. The rest of the time, it feels like you're in a crypt or the desert. So for this one to be set on board a spaceship and for them to shuttle down to alien worlds, it was very much more at that sci-fi end of things. After what feels like a kind of middle chunk of the year where you're just going from, you know, some fairly uninspiring backdrops to some other ones.
No, I really enjoyed it. It was a good story. Okay. What's your guess going to be for third place?
Well, by this point, I'm assuming the bloody massacre has won somehow. So for third place, I'm going to guess Mission to the Unknown.
It's the massacre.
Hooray! Hooray! I don't know how this came in the top 3.
Yes, we were joined by Brendan from Flight Through Entirety.
Oh, right, yeah, no, now I do remember how it came in the top 3.
Yeah. Brendan gave it a 10.
Yep.
He obviously enjoyed himself a lot when he came onto the show. I think, yeah, he had some special treatment, and I think that just, perked him up a bit. So, yeah, he gave it 10. You gave it 8.
Okay.
I gave it a 7.
Now...
So it came out at 8.3.
So looking at that number, I wonder how much of my score was down to Brendan's kind of enthusiastic advocacy for the story.
I think he definitely talked me around.
Yeah, I think he's a very persuasive young man.
Yeah.
Because 8, looking back at it now, feels like a very high score for what is a very missing story.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it's quite... I mean, it says a lot about the quality of the story that it's made its way into the top 3 when there is no existing footage to watch.
It's... You say that, but I can't even remember anything about the story. There was just a lot of people walking around stone buildings in Paris plotting. This is the one, I think, where I watched a couple of... 2 episodes were straightforward recons, and then a couple of episodes with this kind of weird CGI thing that someone had done for reasons of their own.
And you decided afterwards that probably wasn't the best idea.
Yeah, so it might be that I need to watch all of this in pure recon format just to...
Blimey, you'd be giving it a 10 if you do that.
Well, I mean, that's... Yeah, life's possibly too short for that. I don't know.
You do like to chuck out a 10, don't you?
Well, I've whopped a couple out just to sort of keep everyone on their toes, really.
Yeah.
But you. So you were the 7 and I was the 8.
Yeah.
So you were.
I mean, that was still up on my, because I think I'd seen, or not seen, I'd experienced the recon a few years back, and I thought it was okay, but it didn't sort of rock my world. But watching it again and then hearing you guys talking about it, and yeah, it just really raised it for me.
Well, would it be if you would say you were going to a desert island and you could take, I don't know, 5 Hartnell stories with you, would this be the one you'd be taking as the kind of hidden gem?
Possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Just because, as you've already pointed out, the Hartnell era is this kind of outlier compared to everything else. The straight historicals are one of the things that makes it so different. One of the many things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it could definitely make its way in there.
Well, then, yeah. I mean, I can't remember now. I'm sure I've listened to other podcasts do their season retrospectives, and does this story normally rate highly for people, or is it more normally one of the season's kind of lower scoring stories?
I don't know.
No.
It's been a very long time since I listened to the early Flight Through Entirety, so I know Brendan enjoyed it when he recorded their episode on it, but I can't remember what the others made of it.
I don't think Nathan liked it.
Yeah, I got that impression too. But I think Sucky from Around the Console, he liked it.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's got its fans.
It's quite exciting to be talking about a story because obviously so many of them are, everyone knows what the twin dilemma's like. Everyone has an opinion about the toy maker. Everyone has an opinion on Dark's Master Plan, Unearthly Child, Brain of Morbius. There are stories that are very much known quantities, but with things like The Massacre, you've got some people love it, some people hate it, but there's no kind of prevailing fan wisdom, or if there is, it's passed me by because I've got other things to worry about. So it's
I think they sometimes get overlooked as well.
Yeah.
If it's completely missing. There's quite a few. Savage is another one I think doesn't get mentioned very often.
well, I think that's entirely fair enough because it's dreadful.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
you could say that.
I just did. But yeah,
So we've got 2 stories left.
we have now. I've got a memo here from a lady called Sue Gray who says that
Oh,
the
right.
Daleks' master plan will not be allowed to fail. So, in terms of Operation Save Big Dog, I'm guessing that the story that came in second was Mission to the Unknown.
You are correct.
I thought I might be.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I gave it 7.5. Deb, our lovely guest, Deb Green, she gave it 8. And you gave it a 10.
Oh,
So it
look
ended up
at
as
me with my
8.5.
10s.
Yeah, chucking them out left, right, and
That's
centre.
what I've given out at least 3 in my hasty.
Do you know how many
scribblings.
10s I've given out?
Whoa, 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you're a hard man. You're a purist, and you're much less fickle than I am. So it's interesting that I've struggled to keep it up somewhat watching this series.
Well, you get to a certain age.
I
don't
mean,
you?
yeah,
Just,
things are not the same. Suddenly you feel kind of out of the loop. But enough about that. In fact, I've entirely lost the thread now. I won't be able to. For a season I've struggled with, there have been at least 3 stories that I've given 10 out of 10s to. So
Yeah,
so
that's not bad, is it, really?
That's very revealing in itself. Mission to the Unknown, the standalone 1-episode story, doesn't feature the Doctor or the TARDIS team. We voted it the second best story of the year.
I think what really helps elevate this one is the remake by UClan.
Yes.
We're going to get it right this time, Ian, because we did have some feedback from the lovely people involved. And understandably, they'd like the correct university to be acknowledged when we talk about it. So, yes.
Absolutely. So that's the University of Central Lancaster or something? I don't know.
Hang on a minute. Don't do that to me now that we got it right. Oh, it's the something. Yeah. Is it? Yeah, something like that. It's the University of Central Lancashire.
University of Central Lancashire. I'm going to write that down. I probably won't ever
Yeah.
need to use it again.
Who knows? Maybe it will get discovered and we'll cover it again.
Maybe they'll animate another missing story. Not animate, but you know what I mean. Make a real version, a remake. I think this is fascinating. I think it's purely the fact that it exists in that remade form, which is very sharp and very fresh, because this story really shouldn't be coming in second place when it's only 1 episode long and the Doctor isn't in it. Do you know what I mean? It's like every other story is at least 2 or 4 or whatever episodes long, and there's a lot of money thrown at it, and there's a lot of writing, and this is just a one-parter. But
I think there's a novelty to the fact that the main cast aren't in it, so that does tend to make it stand out from the rest. And it just rattles along at such a good pace because you're kind of limited to that 25-minute runtime, so you've really got to pack a lot of story in, and I think they do it very, very well.
I'm wondering if, I suppose it exists as obviously as the kind of prelude to Dalek's master plan, but I wonder if on the back of it, or on the back of its success, there was ever a thought about maybe in future series of Doctor Who we can do rather more that don't necessarily involve the Doctor or as heavily, and we would have had a lot more Doctor Light episodes in as early as the Troughton era if that had happened. I don't know, but for all that, obviously they introduced a lot of the concepts that shaped Dalek's master plan and made that such a success. I'm thinking mainly of the Viagra plants and the space security service, I want to say.
That's it. Yeah.
Space security service. It's not galactic. They've not specified a particular part of space or a time period. Just space. Just all of space.
Yeah.
That's hubristic, I think. But who am I to criticise? I love this story, and I'm very pleased for it that it's come second. Hello, so my cat Harvey's just jumped on the desk. So
hey, Harvey.
He's giving
He's a big fan as well.
He is a big fan.
Yeah.
The toy maker came last. Yeah, I thought that would make it. He's smiling now. So, Mark, what could possibly have emerged the top of our poll?
Well, this will come as a surprise to absolutely no one if you've listened to any of the episodes we've done on Season 3, because it's the Daleks' Master Plan.
The Daleks' Master Plan, you say. Now, what sort of thing is that?
Well, it's a massive 12-part epic. Space opera a go-go. So our guest, it was so big a story, we had to do 2 episodes on it. So our guest for both those episodes was the fantastic Ben Schneider. What a legend he is.
He is, isn't he? He's lovely.
He's a really lovely man. He gave it 11 out of 10. So I don't know, that's kind of cheating a bit.
I
will allow it because it's such a good story.
I'm going to come down like a ton of bricks on you there. So the reason the Daleks Master Plan won is because of illegal votes being cast.
No, not necessarily, because I gave it 10.
Okay, so we got 10.
And you gave it X.
I did, didn't I?
Yeah, which in Roman numerals is 10, so I've counted that as 10.
Sure. So let's do a thought experiment, Mark. Let's say that 11 was discounted, and the most Ben Schneider could award the story was 10. Yeah. That would give us 3 tens. Divide that by 3 is a score of 10. Yeah, carry on.
What haven't we said about this story already? It's just a massive, sprawling epic. It has no right to keep you enthralled for 12 weeks, but it just does. It just rattles along. You've got an amazing cast in there. You've got these great guest cast actors who come in to join the TARDIS team. You've got Nick Courtney, you've got Gene Marsh, and you've got the amazing Kevin Stoney. Yep.
You've got also, I think you've got the kind of. Now, am I remembering this right? The first 6 episodes were written by Terry Nation, very much as a bog standard Terry Nation 6-part story. And if there's anyone who knows how to churn one of those out and keep it tight and keep it rattling along, it's Terry Nation. And then it was, I want to say Dennis Spooner. Yeah. So he is giving you kind of 2 or 3 episodes in Egypt for no reason.
Because it's fun.
Yeah, well, there's no reason why it wouldn't be there, and there's no better place for it. So it just, halfway through the story, I mean, if all 12 had been written by Terry Nation, I think it would have been tiresome, and I say this as someone who's recently started watching Blake 7.
Right.
My God. But that kind of halfway change of ownership you didn't really feel a change in story terms, because Spooner was very careful to kind of keep the same plate spinning that Terry Nation had done. But that kind of widening of the scope and the parameters of the story and the locations it visited, bringing back the monk for a couple of episodes is a fantastic way of killing a bit of time without anyone feeling like you were treading water. Again, very exciting stuff. There was the early doors exit of Katerina, which was, at the time, I imagine, really
it's really shocking,
quite traumatic. And it built to that kind of devastating climax that, again,
it's just dark as all hell.
It really was. It could have been the end of the series, and it would have been a fantastic end for Doctor Who if they'd never made another episode after the final part of Master Plan. It was so unprecedentedly big and climactic and dramatic and macabre, and really chilling when you've got the what happened to Sarah Kingdom growing old like that, and then Hartnell sort of screaming at Stephen. It was.
He's great in this.
It was edge of the seat stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think if anyone was contemplating checking out some of the missing episodes, it's quite a big time investment, but I think it's well worth it.
Well, I think so. I think it's probably, and I say this as someone who's got as far as I have, so end of the third series now. It's the most important story, I think, for that isn't around. It's the biggest beast to revisit, and I wouldn't muck about with things like the Savages or the Celestial Toymaker. If you've possibly got the opportunity to invest that time, then invest it wisely in possibly the greatest Hartnell story ever made. I can't say that.
The audio's great.
Yeah, the audio's great.
The novels were pretty decent. I seem to remember.
Yeah, I think I said at the time, I remember reading them when they were published. I would have been about 12 or 13 then, so I can't really remember them now, but they must have been good, because I wasn't precious about them. If a Target book bored me, I wouldn't finish it, and those I absolutely raced through. So every iteration of the story, I think, does it proud. And wouldn't this have been a great film if there'd been a third Peter Cushing Doctor Who movie?
Yeah.
I
think as a season, it's got to be up there with my favourite 1960s season. Whether that opinion will change as we start to move into the next couple, I don't know, but I enjoy so much about it. It's just so different from what I grew up watching, that sort of tail end of the 70s and the early 80s, and I just feel like I get something fresh from it every time I watch it.
I certainly am beginning to feel like I've been faintly shortchanged by the accident of when I was born, in that, yes, if you grew up watching the Eric Saywood era and you had this kind of thing, I mean, even in terms of watching the next couple of series of Doctor Who, obviously we're about to have a change in actor, and we're going to be in the Patrick Troughton era, and that is typified by Base Under Siege stories and kind of fairly similarly plotted runarounds and Monster of the Week stories, whereas this Hartnell era has been such a broad spectrum of different kinds of story, different ways of storytelling, different genres, different kind of aimed at different age groups. It's been a show really thundering along with no idea what it's doing, no idea who it's doing it for.
I mean, the behind the scenes stuff that's going on is just
absolutely
banana pants crazy, isn't it?
Mired in chaos.
And it's amazing that it comes out as good as it does, really. I mean, it's magical. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I've said this is an inconsistent season of kind of exciting space stories and slow plodding meanders through desert wildernesses, the actual quality of what's broadcast, with the exception of the Toymaker, doesn't really vary too much. And for that to be the case when behind the scenes everything's hostile and argumentative and people aren't talking to other people, and it's just a remarkable testament to the professionalism of everyone, but I think probably mainly William Hartnell, because he doesn't let it out. We all know he was teed off with certain things that were happening behind the scenes, certain people that were joining the production side of things, but at no point is the Doctor any less than 100% engaged, and I
think it showed how much he cared about it.
There are certain,
and that's probably why he got so cross.
Yeah,
it was because he cared about it so much.
Yeah, there are certain other Doctors who you could see phoning things in from time to time, perhaps when they'd had rather too many libations at lunchtime, or or whatever.
The colony rule.
Yes. Aha. So I think, I'm so grateful that you got me on board for this, because I wouldn't have watched the Hartnell era. And David Kitchen is right. It is a fantastically rich and exciting era of a show that hasn't yet settled down into being what we all fell in love with in the first place. It's doing kind of slightly more at this point. It's capable of more.
Yeah.
It's doing more.
So does that leave you feeling quite excited about season 4?
Yes, with the kind
A caveat,
with
I feel.
the kind of caveat that obviously it's all going to change in a number of ways, and I do know going into series 4 that the show that kind of comes out the other end of that is going to be a very different thing, and I have a dim awareness that maybe I shouldn't invest too much time getting to know Ben and Polly, because they may not be part of the show for 5 years. But yeah, I mean, it's very exciting because I know there's a lot of my favourite monsters coming up very soon. Let's not talk about Troughton just yet, but we all know he's a very easy figure to watch. So, So here's the thing, though. I know the show isn't going to be as varied as it has been to this point. I know it's going to settle down and become slightly more formulaic, but within that, I think there is a certain strength of unity. But I think the Hartnell era has been amazing, and I'm very much looking forward to it carrying on for a number of stories before things may, who knows, change.
Well, I would just like to take this opportunity to thank all of our listeners for sticking with us through all this, and being so kind in leaving really nice reviews for us on places like Apple Podcasts and Podchaser and what have you. It feels great to see people are enjoying it too. And also, thank you so much for all the amazing feedback we get. Not just from Twitter and Facebook, but also our audio contributors as well. It's just, it makes it all worthwhile.
It is great, isn't it? And it's really fun, sort of building that prevailing wisdom and sort of seeing everything that I've clumsily reached for, kind of condensed to a very succinct and well-worded tweet by someone I've not met yet or whatever. It's wonderful. It's really enjoyable, and we hope that everyone continues to bombard us with their thoughts and their appreciations for these stories as we carry on.
And also a huge thank you to all of our guests who've been on and given us their unique takes on these stories, because I think it just helps to keep it fresh. And I'm sure it will just be every episode we'd just be saying the same old things over and over again, but by having this great collection of people coming in and just chatting about it and giving their ideas and thoughts, it just helps to keep us hopefully on our game as well.
Keeps us on our toes, keeps us honest. Yeah. Marvellous.
Well, that's it for this episode. We're going to take a little bit of a break, and then we'll be back with The Smugglers.
Oh.
Down in Cornwall.
Oh, lovely. Excellent. I'll look forward to that.
Yeah. So until next time, I was Mark.
I'm afraid I was Ian.
And we'll be back with Season 4 very soon.
Bye. Goodbye.
Bye-bye, Duggan. If you'd like to get in touch, you can email us at mailbagofrassilon@gmail.com. We're also on Twitter @TimeEndSpacePod, and you can also find us on Facebook. If you want to leave some audio feedback, there is a link in the show notes. You can use your phone or your computer and leave up to 60 seconds of feedback, or if you're listening via the Anchor website, you can click on the message button and leave your audio. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you to Momo Tempo for providing our theme music.